this evening. My name is Kylie McCormick and I am the president of the Casper League of Women Voters. It is my honor to introduce our 2022 Natrona County Assessor Candidate Forum. And thank you to our candidates for coming out this evening and agreeing to share your platform with the voters. This is so important for people to be able to go to the ballots or go to the polls and know that you are voting for someone who truly represents you. I want to thank everybody for coming out this evening and for those of you who are watching at home, and encourage you all that we want to hear from you. We have some little note cards in the back there and some pins, so if anybody has a question for the candidates, that we encourage you to fill out those, and you can either hand that to a league member. We have Dan Grace in the back who would be happy to run those for us, or you can bring that on up to the moderator table. And I want to thank my fellow moderator, Beth Worthen, who is going to be, as soon as I relinquish this microphone, she's going to be explaining the format of our forum for everybody and getting us started on our way. I also want to thank Betsy O'Neill, who is our timekeeper tonight, as well as Carrie Party, who is our recording for us this evening, and the Natrona County Library for co-hosting this event with us and for giving us this space to have it. Thank you. A little bit about the League of Women Voters before I hand this over to Beth Worthen. We are a organization that grew out of the fight to recognize women's voting rights. And here in Wyoming, we are the first place that recognized women's voting rights. And we know that that wasn't just accomplished by a group of women, that was actually accomplished by a group of men. William Bright is the man who introduced that bill. And though it passed through an entirely Democrat legislature, that bill landed on the desk of a Republican governor who signed it into law. And at the League of Women Voters, we live up to those ideals of the movement, that we welcome everyone to be a member, and we are a nonpartisan organization. We really strive to do that it's not a Republican or a Democrat issue to vote informed, that is an everybody issue, and it's not limited to men and women, and our membership is not just limited to women, that we are open to everybody ages 16 and up. Encourage you all, if you're interested in joining the league, to check out these pamphlets in the back and things that we do. We put it on forums like this because we believe in everybody being able to vote informed. And we also put together online voter guides. So definitely check out vote411.org and see what else these candidates have to say, as well as all of the candidates who are going to be on your ballot before you go to vote on August 16th or before. You can go to the courthouse now and cast your ballot in person or pick up an absentee ballot. So without all of that out of the way, I'll go ahead and hand this on over to Beth and we can get started. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kylie, and thanks everybody for being here tonight. And I'm going to talk to both the audience and to the candidates. The candidates, in terms of the format, will have a minute and a half to introduce themselves. And we'll start with Miss Candidate Haid over here and just work our way down. And then you'll actually have 3 minutes to answer each question. And we'll kind of rotate, so we'll start with Candidate Keating and then work our way down and then back to Mr. Haid. And then at the end, you'll have an additional minute and a half for any final statements. We'll probably have room for about 8 or 9 questions. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, as Kylie said, we really would love to make sure that we get your questions. If you have questions for the candidates, please give them to Mr. Grace or bring them up here. Let's see, Betsy is our timekeeper, and she will hold up a yellow card when you are halfway through your time, and then a red card when you need to stop. And we'll go ahead and cut you off at that red if you're still speaking at that time. Let's see, did I miss anything? I think we're okay. Okay, so with that, let's kick it off, and we're going to give you each a minute and a half for your opening statement.
Very good. Should I stand up or stay sitting?
Whichever you prefer.
I agree. All right, well, my name's Tim Haid, born and raised here in Casper. Can you all hear me well? Very good. I'm made that mistake last time and not asking. So I've really never done anything political before, ever, actually. I've owned a couple businesses in Casper. I've owned a couple of houses in Casper. I've raised my family here. A lot of my family is still here, actually. My grandparents, I'm lucky enough to still have them. Really kind of what's happened that's put me into this position of wanting to run is, you know, we all hear the little things here and there, and of course negative things travel farther. So I started hearing over the last couple of years all of the negative things about the assessments and about people's property taxes going up and about how people feel about those things. And then really the kind of straw that broke the camel's back for me was my grandparents got a letter. Their property tax was going to go from $177 to $1,201 was what theirs was going to do. They're both on a fixed income. They're both 81 years old. My grandpa's a vet. That hit really hard for me, so I decided that I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do what I have to do to make it work, make it right, and do whatever it has to do. I'm absolutely not one of those guys that's like, that's not my job. And half of the stuff that I'm going to talk about tonight is not my job as the assessor, but I think it's my job as a citizen, and I think it's my job as an elected official. For if people are going to elect me and they're going to put my name up there, then I'm going to give her hell. I think we only have 2 of these.
Thank you, Tim. My name is Matt Keating, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, especially my family. I was a fireman for 25 years. I was a fireman about 18 years, and my wife was watching the news in the kitchen, and they were advertising for people to run for office, and she asked me to run. So for better or for worse, yeah, I started making signs in the garage, and I ran for county commissioner, and I was elected and started serving in 2005. In 2005, I found that the juvenile detention center was where the kids that were being held in the juvenile detention center were really being neglected, and just like Tim is advocating for that the process be done correctly. I mean, he's advocating for his grandparents. We all just want to get it right. So I advocated for those kids, and eventually we got a juvenile detention center, and giving our kids the best chance that they can not to transfer to the adult facility. But as a county commissioner, I had several people coming to me that were being mistreated by the assessor's office. And so I did my due diligence, and I went in and I sat with the assessor at the time, was Connie, and the chief deputy, Tammy. And I asked how the process worked. I couldn't get a simple answer, and because I'm stubborn, I said, well, you know what, if you guys can't fix this process, I will. So just like Tim's advocating for his grandparents,
Thank you, Mr. Keating.
you're welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. My name is Tammy Salisbury, and I am running to be your next county assessor. I was born and raised here in Casper, went to school here. I have worked 13 years in the assessor's office under 2 different administrations. And I am here to inform you that I have listened to the cries of the people for the last 4 years under this administration, and I will work for the Natrona County taxpayers and do my very best to make sure that I get the assessments correct, accurate, the data is complete, the staff is trained and cross-trained. I have always done my very best at my job. I have always followed statutes, and I've always followed the law, despite what my opponents have been saying about me. My number is out there. You may contact me anytime, and I will be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So I'm asking for your vote on August 16th. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Keating. Please describe your interpretation of the Wyoming state statute on how to assess property.
3 minutes?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Well, how we assess property is, first of all, we vet the sales. Department of Revenue Chapter 6 rules say that there are 9 different criteria that sale has to pass through, and the gentleman that's doing that in the back of the room, currently part of my staff, they're very well trained. So, first of all, the staff is trained, and the assessments are correct. But after those sales are vetted, then there are a requirement that 5 sales be pulled from an area. But when we pull those sales, we group those and we stratify those, and then if they, in that strata, if they're below 0.8 or above 1.2, we look to find out why. Did somebody underpay? Did somebody overpay? Or maybe we need to find a different grouping. In that analysis, when we're developing these land economic areas and these submarket areas, we are able to discover that, for example, Older Mills is selling the same statistically as older Evansville, or newer Evansville is selling the same as newer Mills, that kind of thing. We have a large number of land economic areas inside Casper because we have the sales to support that, and a lot of sub-market areas. Where we start getting into, where it starts getting harder, is when you get outside the MPO and you're limited by sales when you have a minimum of 5 that's required. So once you get outside the MPO, we start grouping by size. This last year we grouped things from 5 to 30 acres. And though they're statistically compliant, there's still that. So after we mailed, all of the sales that we had, because after those sales are vetted and validated, if we don't use that validated sale, we better have a good reason why not. But that grouping threw in places like Coal Creek. But so even after we mailed, which may be one of the reasons, I'm not sure if Tim's grandparents was involved in that we made a correction and moved and valued those with some like properties, more like BB Brooks. So it's really a question of a lot of work, a lot of looking online at Zillow, Realtor.com, making phone calls, and some of that honestly is knowledge of Natrona County, and then talking to the taxpayer, right? I mean, we've had taxpayers that come to us and say, look, 2 similar contiguous parcels are valued exactly the same, but that guy's got a well. How come we have the same value? Well, until we're able to develop sales to be able to differentiate the two and give a different value, they're going to have the same value. So through this process last year,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Same question?
Same question. Please describe your interpretation of the Wyoming state statute on how to assess property.
Okay. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you are using valid sales that are within our county, and that those sales are with comparable properties, neighborhood to neighborhood or land to land, so that you are getting the most accurate. And it's a mass appraisal system, which is we have to use all of these areas. So if more than 5 houses sell, then we use all of the sales. If less than 5 houses sell, then we can go back in up to 5 years, I believe, to gather those sales that have happened. But what I've been hearing all across this county is that the comparables are not correct. The mountain is being compared to the lake, or Coal Creek to Dempsey Acres, or the west side to the east side. Those are definitely differences, and you want to make sure that those comparables are correct and that you are using a valid sale. So a valid sale, that means that it has to be on the open market. invalid sales are between family members, friends, handshake, for sale by owner. Those are invalid sales, so those sales are not in that data and shouldn't be used in that data. My goal is to make sure that those properties, those areas, that the neighborhoods are apples to apples, oranges to oranges. So that is very important to get those comparables in the correct neighborhoods, and so that the people have correct assessments. Thank you.
All right, could you do the yellow card again when I've got like 30 seconds?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that'd help. Okay, so that's a difficult question for me to answer because I haven't done hardly anything with this yet. I started running, kind of not really on a whim, but as I've explained. But I've learned a lot in the last 2 months. I've dedicated a little bit of research to this. I've asked Matt some questions. I've had a lot of people ask me questions on my Facebook page, which has exploded, especially in the last month. It has really exploded. So I've done what I could to search some of this stuff out and see what's going on. And so I don't have the ability to answer it the way that these guys do, but I have the ability to answer it the way that you would if you, as the taxpayer or the property owner, would see it from the outside looking in kind of thing. So number one is, it's insanely complicated. You probably understand that from listening to them. It is insanely complicated. And it's a difficult system to navigate, and of course most things with the government, that's how they do it. They're really good at it. They hire lawyers to write a lot of this stuff so that it's difficult for the normal person to understand how you're supposed to do it and what you're supposed to do. One good thing is, well, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say good thing, but the State Department of Revenue and the Department of Equalization really completely cover all of this stuff. Anyone that becomes a new assessor has to go through 2 weeks of training. And then there's all of these things that you have to do to keep up with certification, to get certified, and to continue on. Most of our properties are actually assessed via a mass tax assessment program that does most of the work itself. There's about 47,000 properties in Natrona County, and I think currently there's 14 employees. So if you think about those numbers, those don't correlate. There's no way possibly that those 14 employees could actually go out and individually assess every property. And that's where they put all of these different things in place to do the LEAs, which is the areas of what is assessed per what, based on what, and comparable to what. And that's what you're basically doing as the assessor is for a lot of these things is you're putting in this certain amount of data as asking questions basically for what the software wants, and then the software spits out a number. And then that's what you get your assessment for. It's just a number that a computer system spits out. So all that you really have to be able to do as the assessor for the things that are done through the mass assessment program is just data entry, basically, and trying to make sure that that data is correct. Perfect, thank you. As for the actual assessments, I think that we spend so much time trying to, and this is my opinion, trying to find the problems that are in the mass assessment program that we don't have the time to properly actually go out and assess the properties ourselves as we're supposed to. We're supposed to assess every property every 6 years, which we really need to try to make that like 4 years, because you may have a new assessor in 4 years, you know. So I think my time's about up, so we'll continue on. Who's gonna answer the next question?
All right, thank you. So the next question, we're gonna start with Ms. Salisbury and then go back. We're just rotating.
Sure.
And the question is, why should voters trust your equation or assessment? Please focus on describing your position in a way that a brand new taxpayer could understand.
It's a good question. Thank you. When I was appointed interim assessor, one of the things that I heard were taxpayers coming in because when the previous assessor had passed away, I was elected to fill those shoes for the remaining 7 to 8 months that was left. So I had heard my staff trying to do the blame game. I'm not doing the blame game. So one of my suggestions, and that we did implement this, was to bring the taxpayer right to your desk, set them down, and explain everything that we do within that computer system and show them how it's done. Go through their property profile to make sure that we have everything in your home listed correctly. If their barn had burned down, or if you built a garage, whatever it may be, we made sure that we corrected it right then and there, and then sent out a new assessment. That's the best way that I could actually show a taxpayer what was happening with their assessment, versus to just stand up here and go, oh, it's this particular formula and this equation, because there are different ways to assess or come up with a value. And that's how I would continue to do it, is to bring that taxpayer into the office, set them down, and explain face to face. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hay, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Why should voters trust your equation or assessment? Please focus on describing your position in a way that a brand new taxpayer could understand.
Well, you might laugh at this, but I'm really cheap. I don't waste money on anything. I think that the biggest thing with a new taxpayer, and it seems like maybe some of this stuff has changed over the years, that's kind of what I've been getting from some people, is some things, I guess, that maybe weren't assessed before are being assessed now, and this may be wrong, but just from what I've heard, like decks and outbuildings that were not permanent structures, sheds, that kind of thing. A lot of people have been talking to me about that, and they don't understand why they're being taxed for that, for like the little things and decorative things on the outside of their house, especially if it's different than other houses that are kind of in their neighborhood. They're really upset with stuff like that. But as for like a new taxpayer or a new property owner, what they need to learn and to expect, I think the biggest thing that they need to understand from an assessor that's looking to try to get elected is what kind of person are you? You know, are you a value-driven person? Are you a really honest person? Do you show people your honesty? Do you show people your integrity? How else could I answer that? What I would do in the office, the biggest things to begin with, is the way that this stuff runs. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of different aspects in it that catch the problems. Like I kind of hit on to begin with. So my grandparents' first assessment, it was going to be $1,201. Then they found that, fixed it, and then the second one was $640. Then they found that and fixed it, and then the third one, their tax still doubled and was $356, and it was $177 before that. So it just seems to me like there must be some problems in there if they're sending out assessments and then they're getting this input back from the public, and then they're going back through and, oh, we found something, this is wrong. So they send out a whole bunch more assessments, and then they get a bunch more lashback from the public, and then they find something else that's wrong. And we have all these computer systems that should be able to do that for us, and that's one of the biggest things that I want to push to begin with, is use the computer systems, find the problems, get the assessments right to begin with. Most of the other stuff is all completely based on what the Department of Revenue and what the statutes and laws say that we have to do. There's not really a huge amount of flexibility. They really kind of got their thumb on the assessor, especially when there's a work order, which there's in place now, and the new assessor is going to have to abide by that work order. So the Department of Revenue and the Department of Equalization is going to be watching us very carefully, regardless of who is elected here, to verify that things are exactly what they want them to be and what they say they should be. So that's kind of the biggest thing is, I guess, as a new taxpayer, a new property owner, you need to understand who to blame a lot of times, because it's not always the assessor. It's like the most hated job in the county probably. So that's one question people ask me, are you crazy for running?
Thank you. Mr. Keating.
Thank you. If you came into my office,
Turn it back on.
oh, did you?
Sorry, yeah. Hold it. Yeah, got it.
You came into my office and you want to know how we figured your property value. I would show you your property and I would show you a cost breakdown. It's very, very simple. It's replacement cost new, less depreciation, and then it's adjusted for sales. We go over your property because that cost breakdown is specific to your house. What's your square footage? We adjust the quality and condition of that house. We base those off of Marshall and Swift. When we do that, when we set the quality, that sets the multipliers that are also from Marshall and Swift sent to us from the Department of Revenue. Once we get that right, and we do add things that are taxable per the Department of Revenue, things like Murphy sheds, etc., decks, driveways, all of that. But we just strive to get it right. And if I could help by adding that 6-year rotation, we're actually meeting that. We do have 16 staff, but they have done over 8,000 reviews over last year. They're on track. We're on track. Natrona County is producing a quality product, and you guys, it's exciting, and we're proud of the product that we produce, but we are on track. I might share a letter from the State Board of Equalization that says that notwithstanding the rough patches encountered these past 2 years and heavy criticism from various sectors, county commissioners, legislators, taxpayers, you have persevered and by all accounts headed in the right direction. They go on to say, for our part, we will continue to trumpet to all concerned your Herculean efforts to bring our office into full compliance with the law and sound mass appraisal process. We're doing it. And Tammy's been out for a little while, so when we get something wrong, like, Tim communicated to our statistician a couple of accounts, so we looked them up because we just want to get it right, and we looked them up. Well, why the increase? Well, two of those, as I understand, were ag, and they lost that. We've had a lot of mobile homes that were affixed, the titles were surrendered to the property, and we valued those like everything else at replacement cost new, less depreciation, but then adjusted for sales. And the sales were dramatic. But in our groupings, the amount that people were paying for these purged mobile homes was crazy stupid. But in the work that we're doing, we found that not all of the affidavits or all of those swearing saying that those mobile homes that were purged were actually truthful. So at that point, I had a conversation with my chief deputy, who's amazing, by the way, and I said, look, I can't defend this. I'm backing off of it. And so he got another letter. But ultimately, we're just respecting the process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Haid. What experiences qualify you to manage the
Did Tammy get to answer
Oh, wait.
that question?
Yes, she
Yes.
started with
Sorry.
it.
Yep, she
Thanks
started.
for checking.
Oh yes, thank
Let's
you.
be fair.
All right. So what experiences qualify you to manage the 16 city employees in the assessor's office, and what is your management philosophy?
Well, my management philosophy is mostly through it's all through doing business here in Casper and Natrona County. I think that the most important thing is the customers, and in this court case, it would obviously be the taxpayers and property owners. So I'll just hit it from the business aspect first, and we just talked about this at our Monday meeting this morning, actually. So the customers are the most important because without customers, you don't have a business, not at all. And number two, most important, is the employees themselves. They are absolutely number two, because if they don't take care of your customers, you don't have any customers, you don't have a business, right? Then your tools and equipment would be number three, because your tools and equipment, your employees have to utilize to take care of your customers. Of course, if you don't have your customers, you don't have business. So all the three of those things are extremely important. You have to make sure that you have decent employees that show up on time, that do a good job, that are diligent, that are hardworking, that are honest, all the things that you want out of yourself, of course, and as what you would want out of an elected official, especially so. But you have to make sure that they have the proper equipment, they have the best equipment, the newest equipment, not necessarily the newest equipment, but the best equipment, stuff that's efficient. And you have to train your employees to be efficient. You have to have regular meetings with your employees to let them know whether they're doing a decent job or a not decent job. Give them some criticization. You know what I mean. It's difficult talking to all these people. It really is. It's so much different. But I'm trying. So anyway, Management-wise, my experience, currently we have 12 or 13. It keeps changing. We've had a tough time this year keeping employees, especially our mow crews. But I manage 12 or 13 employees. My business partner, I do have a business partner. We manage those people together a lot of times, but he runs another business, so he's gone a lot. So he's gone right now, as a matter of fact, in Arizona hunting antelope, or guiding antelope. So there's lots of things embedded into all of that thing that you really have to do if you're going to do a good job in business or in anything else in your life. If you have employees and you're going to manage those people, you have to make sure that they're taken care of, that they do a good job, that they know what they're doing. That's extremely important. They're the face of your company when they're talking to another person. It's the same thing as the assessor's office. They are the face of the assessor's office if that's who you're talking to, or that's who you're talking to on the phone. So you want to make sure that they know what they're talking about, and that they're doing a good job and that they care. That's a really huge deal that we talked about this morning, actually. If you care, if you genuinely care about the customer and about their happiness and about the product that you're giving them or the services you're giving them, that goes so far. Even if you just messed up and broke something, it just makes a huge difference if you actually genuinely care. And then also, if you strive and you try to actually fix the problem, because most of the time in the service industry, what you're doing is you're trying to solve a problem for them. Maybe they're not feeling well and they can't mow their own yard anymore, they've gotten old enough that they can't do it, or whatever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You have to have an office full of professionals to do the work that we do. It's a difficult job, and there's a tremendous amount of pressure. A couple of months ago, I had a gentleman sitting across my desk like hundreds of other people have, and he said, I looked at his account, and he said, so you're not going to change anything? There was nothing inappropriate about his account. It was done correctly. He said, well, I carry a gun, I know what you look like, and I know where you live. So what do I value? Well, I value my wife and I value my kids. And I value my staff. They're professionals. As I understand it, Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, I hope, that they had 2 people that in the office that were permanently certified. We currently have 4.
Incorrect.
Incorrect. Well, she'll give a number. But we've got 4 people that are permanently certified, and a couple of them just finished some classes, so by the end of the year, the Department of Revenue should certify them. That'll give us 6. So as I understood when I took over, that being permanently certified was the high bar. Well, not anymore. It's the low bar that we step over. But we treat each other with respect and honesty. So when those taxpayers occasionally, I think a great majority of them are very, very kind and willing to communicate. But I suppose it's those rare exceptions that kind of stand out and stick in your memory, right? When you've got people that are well established in the community wanting to come across the counter, and you know, my palms sweat and my mouth goes dry and my heart, you know, starts to pump, and I'm like, damn, there's the door, right? So I tell my staff that, look, you're a professional and I value you and I value the job that you do, and we're working to produce the best quality product that we can for the people we've been elected to serve. But if they're yelling at you, hang up. If it's not a conversation anymore, if it's not productive, walk away. I've had field crew that have been presented with a gentleman that says, hey, I can't kill the messenger, but I'd like to. You know, and I've had staff just a couple of months ago bitten by a dog. You know, so look, they're professionals. I won't hang a time clock, but so the environment we've created in the Natrona County Assessor's Office, I think is just amazing. Thank you.
First, I think if you are the manager of your staff, you want to treat them like they matter, because if they matter, they're going to care, and they're going to care about the taxpayers. We had a great working relationship. in the last few months of my interim assessorship. Unfortunately, I lost about half of those before the end of the year, and it saddened me. We lost a great deal of knowledge. I believe in treating any person with respect and dignity. You matter. I matter. Any staff member matters, and they shouldn't have to deal with people who threaten them. I would step in at that time, not lose my cool, might not make me happy, but to defuse the situation. And in all of my employment, from the time I was a teenager through now, I have been very good at doing that. And I have built a lot of relationships in this county by doing that and hearing the taxpayer, listening to my staff, having weekly meetings, listening to their ideas. It all matters. And I think if you treat your staff and taxpayers, or any person, that's going to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next question goes to candidate Keating. Please describe the different offices that deal with the aspects of property tax and what the relationship should be between the assessor and other entities that handle aspects of property tax.
Wyoming Statute 3911-102 defines the Department of Revenue and what it is they do. They provide the canvas system, they provide training, advice, and they can remove a candidate that isn't abiding by the work order. 3911-102.1 is the State Board of Equalization, which is given the work order. They are the appellate court, and they will equalize a county that's out of compliance. I started in January of 2019 to a fixer-upper, and we've been working very closely with the Department of Revenue in their advisory role as mandated by the State Board to get that done. The State Board of Equalization is unique because they have oversight over all 23 assessors' offices. Marty Hartzog, the vice chair of the State Board of Equalization, testified December last year before the Joint Revenue Committee, and he said that the previous administration had misused the process enough that basically the numbers were doctored. For me, I'm also reaching out to, well, the other departments are really peers. Ken Guile, in my opinion, is the best assessor in the state. He's down in Cheyenne. And he was talking to a legislator, and the legislator just asked him a simple question: how the hell did Natrona County get to be such a mess? He said, well, the Department of Revenue and the State Board weren't doing their jobs. There wasn't oversight enough. But we've worked and kept our heads down and gotten to a place where we're producing a product that's just a quality one. But it's not just the Department of Revenue and the State Board and the other assessors, but also the legislators. 2019, there was a property tax refund program that was funded, but things got a little tight in the state, so they cut it. That was one of the first things that they cut back. So I went down to Cheyenne and I testified. It's not saying it's on behalf of me, but I hope I was helpful. Because the hundreds of people that come into my office that have aged and are gray are wondering how long they can continue to pay this increase in tax bill. And so they did fund the Property Tax Relief Fund program, and it was important enough to me that I had it printed on the back of the 47,000 plus notices of value that my office mailed. But we have a good system, but I continue to work because we need legislation to make it better. Joint Revenue Committee Working Group about a month ago gave us an opportunity to testify. Thank you. Who's next?
Can you repeat the question, please?
I would love to. Please describe the different offices that deal with aspects of property tax and what the relationship should be between the assessor and other entities that handle aspects of property tax.
Okay, first, as Matt stated, you have the State Board of Equalization, you have the County Board of Equalization, you have the Department of Revenue. Those are just a few of those in the government side. But you also have the treasurer, the clerk's office, you have the businesses that you deal with every single day. Those relationships are very important to build. I also worked very closely with the Department of Revenue every day. If my staff or if I had any questions, or even the previous assessors, the Department of Revenue was always there. The state board should be an unbiased board, not touting the hoorays for one assessor. To me, that is very biased on that state board, and every county assessor should be appalled. I will also work with any legislation that comes along to better our tax assessment values. Sorry, lost my train of thought there for a moment. It is very important to get it right. The CAMA system has been in place for many, many years. And if it's done correctly, and that data is just not a data entry, you also have to have checks and balances that your statistician, your assessor, or any other staff member that is dealing with those values checks. And it is very, very important that each staff member deals with all of those entities in a professional and good way so that you can continue to have accurate information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the question, please?
I would love to. Please describe the different offices that deal with aspects of property tax and what the relationship should be between the assessor and other entities that handle aspects of property tax.
Okay. Well, we've got the departments down for sure. Definitely been covered there. I think what the relationship should more be is the Department of Revenue is supposed to just be an overseer, basically. They're just supposed to verify at the end that the tax roll is compliant and that things are going in the direction that they need to be going in, and just verification, basically. The Department of Equalization is supposed to be there to protect people from property taxes that go up really high, or protect the state from property taxes that drop really, really low, because obviously that's state revenue and we need that to fund our schools and our fire stations and dozens of other things. The county assessor's office itself is really the front runner or the foreman of the group, where they're out there and they're actually doing the assessments of the properties, and they're actually talking to the public and to the taxpayers and property owners and pushing all that information out. And then they're also the ones that first get all that lashback back when there are problems or there's things that people aren't expecting or things that people don't like. And therefore, I think that the assessor needs to be taken very seriously, especially the board of assessors. There's actually a board of assessors, or I think a group of assessors, I can't remember what to call it, the Association of Assessors for the state of Wyoming. And I think that it would be very important, and I don't think this really happens very much, but I think it's very important for those people to have their voice very well heard by the Department of Revenue and by the Department of Equalization, because they're the ones that are on the front lines but with the public. So when the public are having problems paying their taxes, they're having problems with these valuations going up like crazy. I think that the Department of Revenue and the Department of Equalization really needs to listen to the assessors and say, what's going on? What can we do to actually help this problem? And realistically, because they're all, well, not all of them, but a lot of them are voted in also, and they're supposed to be taking care of all of us and verifying that things are done properly and that they're spending our money wisely. I think all those things really need to work way more amicably together. It seems like now they're more kind of working against each other. The Department of Revenue trains all of the assessors, and we have to follow all of their stipulations and their programs and their policies, and we have to use their system for assessing everything, but we don't really get a lot of input back on that. And I think that that's something that really needs to change, and that's why a lot of these things, if I get to talk about the legislative issues with this stuff, really have to be pushed, and they have to be pushed hard, while this is a really prominent problem that everybody's talking about right now. This is the time to make something change with our legislation. And that's really the underlying thing with all of this stuff. If you want to get to the root of the problem of why all of our assessments are going up and why all of our taxes are going up so much, it's mostly because of what has been implemented in the past and what we're still using for the future. And when that stuff was implemented in the past, they had no clue that we would have 20 years of insane growth. It's 4.7% per year for the last 20 years that we've had for growth in, not growth, but I'll just finish this one sentence, of what our properties have risen in value every year, 24.7%.
Thank you.
All right, candidate Salisbury. Please describe the appeals process and what changes, if any, you would make to that process.
What happens once you have set the values and the assessments are mailed out, you have 30 days to come in and contest the taxes. It has always been done in the past with an informal review, and what that means is that we would take the complaint, pull the files, go through the files, go to the properties, and talk with the taxpayer. If there was an adjustment to be made, it was done. If there wasn't, it was explained why not. After that informal process, they could formally protest, which basically starts another 30 days after they're notified of the informal. I don't know how the current administration is doing that now. I think you only get the 30 days. And if you don't do it within the 30 days, then you lose it. Honestly, I think if the process is done correctly, Natrona County should not see the thousands and thousands of appeals that have occurred since 2019. I have been there under 2 different administrations and have never seen the formal appeals be so outrageous, and it costs us, the taxpayers, thousands and thousands of dollars. So if I could change that, I would want to work with the state board, the Department of Revenue, the commissioners, the attorneys, to see how we could streamline that and make it easier and better for the taxpayer.
Repeat the question, please.
Definitely. Please describe the appeals process and what changes, if any, you would make to that process.
Okay, so the appeals process is basically what's already been said, where a person that's not happy with either the valuation, or sometimes it's just the number of the tax itself that just makes them upset and makes them think that they need to come in and protest their taxes. And it seems like the biggest problems from what I've heard from all of this stuff is communication is difficult. The stuff in the system that we have now is complicated stuff to explain to a normal taxpayer. It really is. It's just a difficult process to explain. I think that they get 30 days total from what I've read, but I think that should absolutely be extended. There's no reason why it shouldn't be extended, really. And that is written in law, I believe, that we have to give them 30 days. And for sure it is that they can only have 30 days, but that should be extended. That would be another legislative issue. But making it easier for people to protest their taxes is important, but there are going to be people that protest their taxes every single year, even if the tax goes down, because they don't like property taxes at all. So there's gonna be some of that you're gonna have to deal with. But when situations that we've had because of what's happened with the past assessors and with the previous assessor, and even just with, in general, of what we've been dealing with all as Americans lately, with everything just going through the roof. People just don't have the time and the money now to go in and do this stuff. People are getting second jobs now. That's why we're having job growth, because they can't afford this stuff. So a lot of people are getting really upset about their property taxes because they're just like, this is just keeps going up, but my house, I'm not gonna sell it. Why is it worth more? Why do I have to deal with this? Why is it a problem? And they get really upset with it, and they get really mad about it. And of course, they're gonna come to the assessor's office and they're gonna yell and they're gonna cry and they're gonna be really upset. The biggest things that I think we can do is try to solve a lot of those problems on the forefront, do as much communicating as we can about to people of why their property taxes are what they are, what the market's doing, how the market's driven, why and how these assessments are all based on market value and based on sales. And then also with the protesting process itself, I really think it's super unfair that the state has a lawyer on their side, and it's basically, from what I hear, like you're going into court and the lawyer can throw these motions up, and well, we don't know what the motions mean or what they are, so we have a crazy unfair advantage when the state has someone that's trained properly in how to tell you that your property is what it is and you're going to pay that tax, and then you're over here and you're saying, well, this doesn't make any sense to me, so what is going on here, let alone it takes forever. There's a person that I was talking to a couple of days ago that his 2020 assessment, I think, is still under protest and it hasn't been solved yet. So that's another huge problem. Things just have to go. I know it's government, so everything's slow and everything's complicated, but we need to try to do what we can to make it better.
Thank you.
Those 2020 appeals were actually brought up because of the petitioner. The petitioner himself wasn't the attorney. It was the petitioner that was put. So I had to learn the word subpoena ducus tecum and in-camera review and a number of different things. The appeal process is simple. We, per state statute, by the fourth Monday in April, or the statute actually says, or soon thereafter, you have to mail your notices of value. There's not a second 30 days unless you make a value change. Anytime that a value change is made, that taxpayer is to be notified, and then they get a 30-day window. But it's the fourth Monday in April or soon thereafter you mail, but there's a tax calendar. There's been some conversation actually about extending that 30-day window. The assessor does not have the authority to extend that window. But the tax calendar, there's issues there as why that hasn't happened, because we have to have our abstract to the State Board of Equalization by June 1st. And then in June, the State Board of Equalization sets up conversations with each assessor. And in June, we sat with the State Board of Equalization and they went through our abstract with a fine-tooth comb. And we're doing a good job. So the appeals process has to happen. You have to have your appeals. The county commissioners sit as the County Board of Equalization, and those are supposed to happen because the findings of fact have to be written and submitted by October 1st. And then you have to have that abstract submitted to the treasurer by September 1st. So if you're wanting more flexibility, and you're going to have to reorganize the entire tax calendar. That makes it difficult. But if the state would change some rules, right? I mean, a number of times I've asked the county commissioners to please come to my office. Let me help you understand how this mass appraisal system works. Because they should have some training, because they are the County Board of Equalization. But I think there's parameters set up in law. There's sideboards for these county commissioners because they don't understand the mass appraisal process. So they're limited to either find for the assessor or for the appellant. And I think that's appropriate. But once you get to the state board, because they do understand this process, much like the Department of Revenue and all 23 assessors' offices. But finally, and tragically, you've got to get to that step before you're actually getting a response from somebody that understands the process. The county commissioners, when they say something, it has weight. So when you have the county commissioners and they say that, well, gosh, we have knowledge of Natrona County and these LEAs should be redrawn, but we don't have the authority to do that.
Thank you.
All right, I think we are to candidate Haight. Each of you has mentioned that taxpayers are feeling the effects of rising property taxes. What, if any, relief is the assessor capable of offering, or what other remedies, statutory, constitutional, or otherwise, could provide relief?
I don't think the assessor can actually technically do anything. All this stuff is written in law. All of it is governed by the Department of Equalization and the Department of Revenue. It has to meet certain criteria for them to certify everything, for it to all go through and be processed properly. It all has to be based off of the sales and all of the other things that we've talked about with this process. And that's where we get into the ideas of what are we going to do to actually solve this problem for now and for the future with legislation, and how can we do that? So I just had the other night, a couple nights ago, and I don't think I put it in this. I didn't put it in there yet. So I'll have to apologize a little bit because it's right here. So legislation that I thought of the other night, which I think this would be an immensely great idea. And this is based off of some conversation that I've had, even with Matt, about the 20% that they're going to get that's extra this year, basically. And they don't want to lower the mill levies, they don't want to change things, they're just going to push it through and we're just going to pay it, basically. So what if we had, I moved it, of course. Here we go. So what if we had legislation that capped what the government can take in revenue from property taxes? That way they would be forced by law, their own laws, to lower their mill levies. Then they have to lower it, right? So if we had like a 5% cap, so they could exceed what they got last year by 5% or whatever number we all decide and we vote on, then they would legally have to lower their mill levies to get to that 5% number. So if we're at 20%, they have to lower it to get it to 5%. The next year, they can only do the same thing. If it's over by a certain number, they have to lower their mill levy to get back to 5% or whatever we all agree on. That would solve this problem to an extent. Our taxes would still be high because they'd still be higher than last year, but it would be something that was manageable, something that was hopefully sustainable, but mostly something that people can understand and count on because it would be written in law.
Who's next? Would you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. Each of you has mentioned that taxpayers are feeling the effects of rising property taxes. What, if any, relief is the assessor capable of offering? Or what other remedies, statutory, constitutional, or otherwise, could provide relief?
So I went to the Natrona County Commissioners and I said, look, would you guys please consider not taking a cut, but just taking the same amount that you got last year? So when we talk about a mill, I lose you. But a mill is simply a tax rate. A county commissioner per state statute is capped. They can't ask for anything more than 12 mills. That's their tax rate. Natrona County has been 12 forever. Last year, 12 mills produced $12,640,000. I asked them, let that be your budget for this year. And in doing that, the assessor doesn't have the authority. They can lower their tax rate. It wouldn't have been 12, it would have been 8.8. I asked mills to do the same thing. What did they say? Well, I got a letter from their attorney saying, hey Matt, you don't have the authority to set a mill. I'm aware, I'm totally aware. But when I talked to the city manager, the mayor and the vice mayor, they asked me, well, is anybody else doing it? Well, not yet, not yet. But the problem with the city of Casper and mills is there are tax rate tests when they if they're not at their max mills at the State Loan Investment Board. State Loan Investment Board is the governor, the top 5 elected officials in the state. They have a tax rate test if you want those grants. If the city of Casper can't get those grants, then I'm told that our water rates would double, right? So what can the assessor do? Do we have authority to adjust the mills? No. What I do? I wrote a letter to the governor. I said, hey, we are a small town with long streets. we absolutely have the ability to sit around the table, loosen our ties, and come up with a solution. So in this elevated environment, values are up, people are paying crazy, stupid prices. Adjust your policy at the executive level, allow these cities, towns, and counties to be eligible for grants at the state level, and with their mills being lowered. Because the revenue across the board, last year to this year, if they adjusted their tax rates, it would be a 20% reduction in our tax bill. And they would be getting the same revenue that they got last year. So what can happen? Well, I'm working on a number of things, to be quite honest.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. Each of you has mentioned that taxpayers are feeling the effects of rising property taxes. What, if any, relief is the assessor capable of offering? Or what other remedies, statutory, constitutional, or otherwise, could provide relief?
Well, first off, I think we should start in the assessor's office. If we have a process that is done correctly, procedures are done correctly, the data is done correctly, we shouldn't see these big inflated increases. I will work with any legislation that can help take the burden off of our taxpayers. I don't want to be taxed out of my house, neither do you. And it's getting to the point that we are. There are just a few programs that are available. One is through the Treasurer's Department for the elderly and disabled, and then again the veterans exemption. Both of those I think should be increased. I think an acquisition value would be great. Cap bill was introduced and it failed at 3%, 5%, and 20%. That was just last year. So a cap I don't think is going to work. And if there was a cap, wouldn't you think that every year that the government wants to raise those prices, that whatever that cap is, it's going to raise your value? So I don't think a cap is going to work. Acquisition value might have a chance, and I would support any and all information and any information I could provide to legislators to help be an advocate for the taxpayers on that. Thank you.
All right. So I believe that we are on candidate Keating.
Oh, thank you.
Should the last sale price of a property in Natrona County be publicly available? If not, what is the value in not disclosing that price to the public?
I don't think there's any value in it. Tawami's a non-disclosure state, and I wish we weren't. I mean, 30-day window, it's crazy. That's our only opportunity to show you the sales that we use to get to your value, right? We are doing it right. If the assessor is doing it right, the assessor doesn't set the market, he follows it. And so, look, and again, we're back to that replacement cost new, less depreciation. And then it's adjusted for sales. Remember that part, because that's the important part. When oil went negative and we had COVID, I honestly thought then, because I've always seen Wyoming as being commodity driven, I thought then the market would turn. I was wrong. Even the sales that we've seen over the last 6 months are still elevated. So it doesn't make any sense to me that, well, the assessor is getting the process wrong. Actually, when we started in 2019, we put our heads down and we're getting it right. And it's not inappropriate for the State Board of Equalization to write a letter and say, hey, you know what, you're doing a great job. Working with the Department of Revenue over the last couple of years, I would come home and I'd tell my wife what the positive things that they would say. And she would ask me, well, why aren't they saying something? I said, because they're an umpire. They just call balls and strikes. It's not their job, right? So my wife was having surgery, and sorry, I'm not gonna talk about it, but I got this letter in the mail, And Tim's gonna cry because he's a wimp, right? I'm so sorry. Yeah. But man, I value friends and family. I thought that was the most important thing. And that's true, it's true. But doing this job right is cost me friends and family. And to be accused otherwise isn't friendly. It's just not friendly. But, so what the hell else are we doing? Well, I tell you what, 10-year plan, let's talk about it. Acquisition, 3% cap, totally fine. Let's talk about it. We did that. Although Tim wasn't available, I did try and speak a little bit on his behalf on the 10-year plan, but I won't talk anymore about that. But we did talk about acquisition values. In fact, I released the white paper that was produced by the Assessors Association, Department of Revenue, State Board of Equalization. Some legislators were there. Acquisition was there. I've been advocating for acquisition 3% cap, and I'd like to talk about why. But there's also the homestead exemption. But see, the issue with the 10-year plan, acquisition values at 3% cap, they require a constitutional challenge because we're getting away from fair market value. In Natrona County, well, across the state, it's law. You go into a business and you got tables, chairs, and computers. That's personal property. It's taxable. Well, not this year. If that value of that personal property is $2,400 or less, you're welcome.
Thank you. Would you like me to repeat that question?
Yes, please.
Should the last sale price of a property in Natrona County be publicly available? If not, what is the value in not disclosing that price to the public?
Well, unfortunately, we are a non-disclosure state. Why? I'm not really sure. I've always thought that the sales should be available to anyone who'd want them and all year long. Excuse me, I'm having a hard time with my voice. Again, I would advocate to change that. I think it's important for people to have more than that 30-day window to get the comparables for their property and to see how it's trending throughout the year. The sales that the assessor's office collects from January 1st through December 31st of the previous, or of that year, is used to evaluate the next year's taxes. Somehow I'd like to see that change a little bit because maybe the market's trending downward versus upward. And it's been 4 years. These inflated prices started in 2019. And the big influxes in value where people are coming in and purchasing houses unseen for a cash amount has just recently happened. Why? It's after COVID. People are moving out of the cities and they're coming to smaller cities. We should welcome them, but I also feel that we need to protect the homeowners that are here so that we're not priced out of our homes. And so I believe that those values should be available all year long. Thank you.
Repeat the question, just please.
Should the last sale price of a property in Natrona County be publicly available? If not, what is the value in not disclosing that price to the public?
The value, generally, when things are hidden, there's generally a reason why, and it's usually a malicious thing. So I'm not sure why those values are hidden, why we're not able to get that information, but it's probably lining somebody's pockets. It's probably the reason why that information's hidden. I don't see any reason why that information needs to be hidden. If you're looking at a house that's for sale, there's a pamphlet on the side of the real estate sign and it says the price that they want for it right there. So what's the big deal with actually stating how much the person actually did pay for the houses? I just don't understand why that is a thing. Really, it shouldn't be. that's another thing that we could probably change with legislation while we're talking about those issues anyway. What was the second part of that question?
Oh.
Sorry.
It was if you don't believe that it should be publicly available, what is the value in not disclosing the price?
Sure. So absolutely, I think everything should be transparent, especially in government, realistically. If the government has access to that information when the deeds are recorded and that kind of thing, I don't see any reason why that should be protected in any way, shape, or form. If we're going to continue to utilize the system that we should have access to that information. It's very pertinent, very important information. And it kind of doesn't make sense that we have laws that say that we have to use information, but we can't have that information, even though they want us to use that information. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's how things go in government a lot of times. They don't necessarily always make a lot of sense. But yeah, I think that that's a big deal. If we're going to continue to utilize this information, we should strive for that. And the only thing that I've really heard, which is just probably someone's opinion, is that the board of realtors are actually who are trying to continue to keep that information from us. So I'm not 100% sure if that's true or false. It's just what I've heard. But I guess there's nothing really else I can talk about with that, but I have a little more time. So we haven't really talked about the 10-year plan idea that I had yet. Matt kind of hit it on it just a little bit. It was the first idea that I had when I started thinking about all of this stuff and what could we do, being that we did have our taxes that were pretty stable for a long time, but they didn't really increase, like the values were increasing, and then the State Board of Equalization came in and said you have to take these values and get them up to where they need to be, which is how we got, a lot of people got property taxes that doubled, some tripled, a few quadrupled. I mean, they have gone through the roof in the last 4 years. There's no question about that. So if we were to take an average for 10 years, then all of the new stuff would be in the average, but it would be part of the average. All of the old stuff would be part of the average. I did one for a person that asked me on it. Her property taxes were pretty stable. She must have a really nice house because even a long time ago, her house was valued at $350,000, $400,000. And then it kept going up, then there was one big jump, then it came back down, then it jumped really big again, then it came back down again, then it jumped really big again. I think now her house is assessed at like $650,000. But the average smooths all that out. That would save her $1,200 this year.
Thank you.
Okay, speaking of transparency, that's going to be the subject of our last question for the night before your conclusion statements. And that goes to, I believe, candidate Salisbury, your first step, and then we'll go to the other candidates. How would you bring more transparency to the assessor's office, and what would it look like? Or if you believe the office has sufficient transparency, please highlight where and how.
Again, when I worked there, in the last few months, we were implementing for the taxpayers who came in to come in, sit with us, whether they requested it with me or with a staff member. I would continue to do that. It's very important that taxpayers know what's going on, how their money's being spent, where it's going to. I believe that every staff member should have respect and care for the taxpayer who's coming in contesting their prices, because it's their money and it's hard these days. So transparency is a very, very important part of that office. It belongs to the public. We work for you. I have continued to receive phone calls after phone calls throughout the last 4 years, and to do my best or direct those people to who they should talk to help with the inflated prices that are going on right now. I will continue to do that. And I believe that office, there shouldn't be anything, even with the non-disclosure aspect of it. Those should be available to you, no matter what anyone says, whether it's a legislator, realtor, All of that information should be disclosed to the taxpayers. Thank you.
Sweet. Love this question. Absolutely love this question. So transparency got brought up in the beginning of this when I started running with everything, and it was a big hot button topic for everyone. So I took it to the next level. Transparency and politics do not get along at all. People don't answer questions. They won't answer the phone. They block people from Facebook pages and all kinds of other things. It's just one of those things that transparency doesn't go hand in hand with. So I thought, I'm going to fix that myself if I have to. I created a Facebook page that now has become a public forum. I haven't deleted anything off of that Facebook page. Matt's commented on it. People have gone after me on it. I don't delete their comments. I answer their questions. If they have something negative to say, that's fine. They can say it. It's Facebook. It's completely public. The whole thing is public. And anyone can still see that information. You can go on there right now on your phone if you want to. Look up Tim Haight for Natrona County Assessor. All that information's in there. I haven't deleted anything. You'll see my responses to what people have said. You'll see people that make themselves look very bad sometimes by trying to infuriate the situation or all kinds of fun stuff. It's very interesting what it's turned into by all means, but I've kept it insanely transparent. And that's how I would do everything. I think communication is key. And with everything that I've tried to do, especially through Facebook, I'm sure most of you have probably seen my ads because that's what I've really pushed with this stuff is Facebook stuff. Because it's insanely efficient. And efficiency is a very good way to run a business or to run the assessor's office, I believe. I think efficiency is very important in anything that you do. The more efficient you are, the more you can get done. So, with that assessor's page that I created, like I said, nothing's been deleted, everything's there. I've been insanely transparent with everything. I've tried to answer everyone's questions in every way, shape, and form. And another thing that I don't think anyone's ever done, I'm on Facebook Live every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30, and anyone can get on there. In Natrona, anyone can get on there technically, all over the world, and ask me questions, basically face to face, because it's on Facebook Live. And you can put my feet to the fire, you can ask me questions, you can, whatever you want to do, it's live, it's on there. So that's transparency.
My son Joe's in medical school. He started in today, and it really has nothing to do with anything. I just wanted you to know that I have a son in medical school. He got a 261 on a step 1, and the kid's brilliant. So at my house, my wife takes credit for his brains, and I get credit for his hair. That's kind of the split. I was testifying before the Joint Revenue Committee last December in Cheyenne, and one of the county commissioners got up there and said, we need more transparency in the assessor's office. I talked to him a week later. I said, Dave, what? I'm not smart enough to hide anything, which is why I just get credit for his hair and not his brains, right? So what have we done? People, Natrona County has been through a lot the last couple of years, bringing things back to market value, and that would have been enough. But bring it back to market value and they continue to climb in this inflated market. I wrote a letter try and explain, to try and begin to re-inject trust in the assessor's office, integrity in the assessor's office. That letter, this letter from the state board, which I think is fantastic. And if you go to the Fremont County or the Teton County Assessor's webpage, they've got a little eloquent animated little video that explains what an assessor does. Well, in our efforts, I'm not going to say mine, although I will take full credit for it because they're my staff. I'm so sorry. No, I'm just kidding. But the county commissioners scrubbed it from my webpage. So we're making an effort. We've also been on Facebook. We've been on Report to Wyoming, Oil City, Star Tribune, and communicating with, I don't know how many taxpayers and other assessors across the state. Some of the conversations I'm having with those other assessors across the state are there are 8 other counties that have a larger % increase than we do. Niobrara's at 21%, all the way up to Sublette counties, 59% increase. We're at 20%, okay? So a month ago when I was testifying before the Joint Revenue Committee Working Group, the Department of Revenue was there and she said that there was balance in the system because even though the values go up, you adjust the tax rates down. I said, well, that's not what's happening in Natrona County because the tax rates are staying at their max. When the value goes up, the tax bills are going to follow. So which is why I was advocating prior to that for acquisition values and a 3% cap. There isn't a percent cap. But also, what we need in Wyoming, I think most importantly,
Thank you. All right, so starting with candidate Hay, we'll allow our candidates a minute and a half for any final thoughts or to finish any statements. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate that. A minute and a half is so much easier, honestly. If you give us 3 minutes, we're gonna start rambling. It's just gonna happen. So basically my plan, if I'm lucky enough to be voted in by all of my peers, my plan is to employ systems and policies that are very efficient, that are going to do a very good job to keep things going in the direction that they need to go in for us currently and for our future. Get things to go as efficiently and as streamlined as they can. That takes workload off of the employees that are there. It allows them more time to find mistakes and to fix mistakes and to talk to people and to educate people and to keep this moving forward in the direction that it needs to be moving in. I'm going to be learning as quickly as I can, as much as I can. We have the same systems that are utilized in Platte County. I only have a minute and a half now. Platte County uses the same assessment program and the same tax program that we use, and their tax roll balances every year, which is crazy. That doesn't happen almost anywhere else. So I would like to shadow them for a couple of weeks on my own time before I take the assessor's office and learn as much as I can from them. I've talked to Tammy tonight about learning from her and talking to her because she does have a lot of experience and see what she has to say about this stuff if I'm elected. And move on with that. I've been talking to Matt already about some of this stuff. He's been really nice to me since I started running for this, and I'd like to learn from him. He's the sitting assessor. He's the most current of anything of this stuff, so I'd like to learn from him. I want to get certified through the state of Wyoming. I have to get certified anyway, but I'll make that happen as well.
Thank you. Candidate Keating.
okay, thank you. Values are up. And this is assessed value. So there's market value, and then there's a variety of different ways, depending on what it is, to get to assessed value. Minerals, 100%. Industrial, 11.5%. Ag, residential, and commercial, 9.5% to get to an assessed value. The state of Wyoming, 22 versus 21, is elevated to almost $7 billion in assessed value. Natrona County itself is $284 million. So when I'm talking to the other assessors, and we talked about acquisition 3%, a variety, I'll leave the white paper if anybody would like to read it. What would not require a constitutional challenge is the homestead exemption. So what I proposed was the homestead exemption be based off a percent, because $50,000 off of a house in Goshen County would be helpful, but $50,000 off Teton County wouldn't be much. So I presented a percent. So a percent reduction, because ultimately, who do you want to target? You ask me, I want to target the senior citizen on a fixed income. And so a 25% reduction with a means test. The property tax refund program was based off a means test. Natrona County's median household income was $50,000 and change. 25% reduction with an age test, because again, it's that senior citizen on a fixed income I'm trying to target. And then 25% reduction if your primary home at least 10 years. I think ultimately residential.
Thank you. Candidate Salisbury.
If elected on August 16th, what I want to say is I have worked in the office 13 years, worked nearly every job that's within the office. I will continue to make sure that the office is transparent, that the open door policy is implemented, and that taxpayers can come in without fear or retaliation or anything else that they are fearing right now. I will make sure that I work with legislation to advocate for taxpayers on any reduction that could help relieve these high increases. We want to make sure that our assessments go out fair and correct. It takes a lot of our tax dollars to print those and to mail those. So to have to do them 2 or 3 times within a year, and the increasing protest each year that has happened since 2019, I really hope that I can do my very best to not have that happen in the next 4 years. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you so much to all of our candidates for participating tonight, and thank you to all of you who came out this evening and for all of you who are watching at home. Definitely remember to go out and vote in the primary on August 16th, and then again in the general election on November 8th. Thank you so much, and remember to vote informed. Thank you.